So during this time, you might have come across this problem where you have a cough, you know that feeling when you wake up with a cough, and you don't know if this cough is because of the weather or because of COVID-19. If you go into a building, they'll stop you, they'll take your temperature, they'll ask you if you have a sore throat or if you have a cough. So there seems to now be some help to work out if your cough is because of COVID or not. Professor Thomas Niesler is at the Department of Electric and Electronic Engineering at the University of Stellenbosch. Professor, good afternoon to you. So we need to talk about these coughs first, right? Is there a difference between a normal cough and a COVID cough?
Well, we've answered that question by applying machine learning to recordings of the coughs, and the algorithms are able to tell coughs which are elicited by people who have tested COVID positive and coughs that are elicited by patients who are COVID negative with high accuracy. So your question, I mean, is not clear. On the one hand, I think people cannot tell the difference, but the algorithms are able to tease these apart. So it's an automatic classifier that we've developed.
What's the actual difference between the two different coughs?
We actually don't know. That's a good question. The algorithms are teasing apart, and it's actually quite difficult to reverse engineer what they are picking out. So we present them with the entire signal, and they analyze the frequency content and the way it changes over time. To understand exactly what they are picking out to make their decision is actually quite hard. So we are trying to do that at the moment. But for now, what we've shown that it is possible that there is a difference and that this can be reproduced reliably experimentally in the laboratory, given the sample that we have.
And I mean, is it about the duration of the cough? Is it the type of cough? Is there there must be a very strong correlation for you to be so sure of this.
Again, it's an experimental evaluation. So yes, we have noticed that I think it's the COVID coughs which are a bit shorter than the non-COVID coughs, but that is not primarily what the algorithm is using. What it is using is the pattern of frequencies that is present in the acoustic signal. And that is not something which is really used, to my knowledge, by as a general way of medical diagnosis at the moment, right? So the tests that are used at the moment are based on different things. Yes, what we can show is that when we present a sample of coughs that are known to come from COVID sufferers and a sample of coughs that come from not COVID sufferers to the algorithm, and we optimize the parameters, then when we present a new sample, which is yet unseen, to the same algorithm, also consisting of COVID and not COVID coughs, it's able to classify those correctly, roughly 9 out of 10 times.
Does it matter? I mean, people might have different coughs. Their voices might be different, and a cough involves, the same muscles as your voice. So, I mean, for example, is there a difference between the way men and women cough that affects the algorithm?
Yes, so if we train our classifiers to tell men and women apart, it would do that. The point is that we're optimizing it to detect whether there's COVID or not. And as long as your sample size is large enough and can be assumed to be representative of the population at large, essentially what happens is that the algorithm normalizes out those factors which we are not interested in, for example, male, female, or age, or anything like that, and homes in on those characteristics of the signal which are important to make the decision. I have to say at this point, the sample we have is still fairly small, so this is a pilot study which was funded by the South African Medical Research Council, so just to investigate whether it is at all possible, because that's not clear to begin with. But based on the small sample which we have used to maximum effect, we do get repeatable and reliable results.
I presume, you don't just cough once, right? Do you have to cough several times for it to get a proper sample?
Well, so the method of data capturing that we've used is smartphone based. So people are asked to cough near the microphone of their smartphone and then to upload that sample. That has been our data collection strategy. So in other words, there was no need to go into a testing center, so it's completely non-contact in that sense. The point is also that we don't really require them to cough a certain number of times. The cough is what it is. So depending on their condition, they generally do, you're correct, they cough roughly, I think, 3 times in the recordings we have, but it does vary. The algorithm doesn't take account of that. It averages across the entire signal. So if we have more signal, it processes more. I'm not quite sure, actually, if that makes it more reliable. We haven't analyzed that. But it's not dependent on the number of times you cough.
It's really quite something to do this. And I mean, I knew a cell phone was going to pop up into this somewhere. I presume it's not that difficult to, make an app to do this for people.
So the project, actually, we've been busy for a number of years trying to classify the coughs of tuberculosis sufferers. That's where it came from, and that is still our primary aim, because that is a huge problem in the developing world and in South Africa specifically. So when the COVID epidemic started, it was a natural thing to try. The tuberculosis coughs, incidentally, are much harder to tell apart. There, really, it is very difficult to hear any difference. The COVID coughs, it seems to our ears, there's a slightly larger difference. At the moment, these things are running in the laboratory, so we run a lot of experiments, and they use a supercomputer, actually, to do the number crunching. Eventually, though, it would be possible to implement this on a smartphone, even if the processing was remote. But we're still some way away from that. We need to gather more data to begin with to validate that this performance really does scale. And then we'd also need to go through all those hoops that are required for medical regulatory approval. So that still has to be done. Nevertheless, the pilot does give a strong indication that this is a method which could be used for screening and possibly to assist, especially at the front line, as a first diagnosis.
Well, I mean, I can just imagine, when you get to a building and the security guard asks you to put down all your details, I mean, you'd feel so much safer as the manager of that building, having people cough into some sort of device, then you'd know people don't have COVID. I mean, the implications of this are very interesting.
Well, maybe. I'm not so sure if it's a good idea to ask everybody to cough when they arrive at the building. I mean, I think that is something that, the medical procedure has to sort out. I'm looking at it from an engineering point of view. So this is possible. What the best way of applying the technology is, I'm actually not sure.
It's very interesting. You're going to make sure the Americans don't swoop in and steal your idea? They'll be very interested in this.
Okay, well, I'll try my best.
Professor, thanks very much indeed. Professor Thomas Niesler is at the Department of Electrical and Electronic Engineering at the University of Stellenbosch.